on the subject, "It's good for me that I have been afflicted." I get my text from my sermon title from this text in Psalms 119:71, which states, "It's good for me that I have been afflicted." I read that and I thought, what rational person would ever say, "It's good for me to be afflicted"? Think about that. It's good for me to be afflicted. My. Paul says about the same thing in Romans chapter 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. That includes, actually includes everything, good and bad. And you and I have a difficult time understanding why bad things happen and thinking it might be good. But God said, "It's good for me to be afflicted." I want to talk about that this morning. You and I may not can understand that, but God understands it. And we find that the Apostle Paul said this. He was a man that God wanted to use in a great way. But before he could be used in a great way, he said this here: "It's good for me to be afflicted." It's good for me to be afflicted. Paul, to be used of God, God had to give him a thorn in the flesh. And it must have been painful because he prayed 3 times, "God, deliver me. Deliver me from this thorn in the flesh." You know, you ever have a thorn in the flesh? It hurts. Every time we get one, the first thing we want to do is get rid of it. And Paul said, "God, deliver me 3 times. But God was going to use him in a great way. And before God could use him in a great way, God had to give him the thorns in the flesh. That was probably pretty painful. Now, there are 2 reasons why God gave him the thorn in the flesh. One reason is because when he first got saved, he was caught up in the 3rd heaven. And God revealed things to him that's never been revealed to any man on the face of the earth. He had what we call an abundance of revelations. He saw things, he heard things that no man's ever seen and heard before. Look here in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 through 9. He said, "Unless I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly therefore will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Now, God gave him this here special revelations. And Paul, by nature, you might say that he had the tendency to be proud. Why? Well, before he got saved, we know that he actually belonged to the Sanhedrin court. And the Sanhedrin court would consist of 71 men, priests, and they made decisions for the Jewish people. This would be equivalent today to our Supreme Court. So naturally, Paul by nature might be a proud man before he got saved. Now when the Lord saved him, God could not use him if he was proud. And so God gave him this thorn in the flesh. Now there's another reason that God had to humble Paul. Secondly, because of his conversion. He had a conversion like no one has ever had a conversion before. He was a persecutor at one time and became the most influential man in the Bible. The most influential man in the scriptures. And he was a persecutor. Persecuting God's church, you see. But the Lord saved him. Look here in Acts chapter 9, verse 33 through 6. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, And suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It's hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise, go into the city, and it shall be told thou must. Now notice here, before he was a Christian, the Jews did not believe in Christ. And he said, Lord, who art thou? And he said, I am Jesus, the very one that he's been persecuting. I am Jesus. Now the Lord wants to use him in a great way. And the Lord did use him in a great way. But he had blessings that the ordinary disciple did not have. First of all, he had an abundance of revelations. God caught him up in the third heaven. He saw things, he heard things that no one's ever seen or heard before. And God said, now don't go, this is between me and you. And he could not go back and talk about it. Boy, that's kind of special for God to do something like that, isn't it? And then for the Lord to save him the way he saved him. Nobody has ever had the same conversion that the Apostle Paul had. And so Paul could have become very proud, and had he become very proud, God could not use him. So God gave him a thorn in the flesh. And God said the reason for this, that it might humble him. So evidently Paul has some problems about pride in the natural world because he belonged to the Sanhedrin, and now becomes a Christian, has these special revelations, a special conversion, and so he could become very proud and say, man, I'm very special. But God gave him a thorn in the flesh to humble him. Because God cannot use a proud person. You know why? Pride is a person who takes credit for something that they have not done. Also, pride takes glory for things they have not done. You ever see anybody take glory for something they have not done? Take pride in it? I remember back in high school, Brother Gene and I played football together. And I never forget, when I was in about the 8th grade, I believe it was, I was uniformed as a football player. And I had a little girlfriend, and I told her, I said, I'm going to play football Friday night. I bragged, you know, in the 8th grade. And I had no idea. I told her I'm going to be playing Friday night. I had no idea that she was going to come to the game. She went to another high school, Columbia High. Had no idea that she'd come to the game and brought her dad with her. I said, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Well, you know, all football players look alike except they got a number on the outfit. So we all came out that night, and I sit on the bench, and sit on the bench, and sit on the bench the whole game. But I had some people behind me, and she couldn't see my number. Oh man, I thought that's a blessing from heaven. And during that night, the star player, Brother Buddy Autry, Gene, he was the star player. He kept doing all kind of things that night, making fantastic tackles and runs. And he also was a kicker. And every time he'd do something great, they'd holler, Odell Belcher. Man, later in the game, they'd holler, Odell Belcher made a tackle. Odell Belcher did this, and Odell did that. Here I was sitting like this here. Finally, the game was over with. I walked off the field. Only player didn't have no gray stains in my outfit. No sweat whatsoever. And I was a star player. Man, she ran up, gave me a big old hug, and said, boy, oh boy, that was some playing tonight. That was good. I never told her different. I guess this very day she thought she was dating a real football player, but what she was a bench squad is all I was. You know? And that's pride. Taking glory for something you've not done. And God cannot use some people because they're so full of pride. If he was to use them, they'd say, oh my, how great I am. One thing that a lot of people do, they're not aware of it in the church. They'll leave church and say, oh, preacher, that was a tremendous sermon. Man, you know what? The devil said, oh boy, you really have arrived. That was something. He'll make you get the big head. He'll make you think all kind of things. God cannot use people that are full of pride because they'll take the glory from him. And so Paul was somewhat leaning that direction, and God gave him a thorn in the flesh that he might humble him, the Bible says. That he might humble him. So we've got to be careful not to let the devil use us. God was to use Paul to write 14 books of the New Testament. My. You tell me that ain't something. Practically the whole New Testament, God used Paul. Tell me that's not something. Man, Paul could say, I am something, boy, I am something. But God said, no, Paul, I'm not going to take that thorn from you. I'm going to humble you, and so that you'll give me the glory and all the praise. You read the Apostle Paul, my friend, he's constantly giving God the praise and the glory because God had to humble him. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And we know that thorns can be very painful. Very painful. And when we get a thorn in the flesh, we want that thing removed right then and there. Yeah. Now, there's some speculation as to what that thorn might be that Paul had. I've heard all kinds of speculation what that thorn was. You hear people when they have trouble, they say, that's my thorn in the flesh. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But anyway, Paul said, this is my thorn. Don't know what it was. Some believe that Paul had real poor eyesight. Real poor eyesight. There's some scriptures kind of indicate that. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 15, the Galatians talks about that they would gouge their own eyes and give their eyes to him if they could. There's some indication. Also in Galatians chapter 6, verse 14, he said he wrote this letter in large letters. So it's an indication somewhat that maybe Paul had poor eyesight. And it's something that people see him walking around not hardly able to see because he had poor eyesight. And it humbled him. He couldn't be proud because they felt sorry for him because he had poor eyesight. It humbled him. Now listen, but you know what? After Paul prayed 3 times for God to deliver him, and God said, no, Paul. I'm going to teach you that my grace is sufficient, and I'm going to humble you through this here thing. And God did. Later on, rather than to consider it to be a thorn in the flesh, a curse, he thought it was a blessing. And he said, I most gladly, therefore, will I give God the praise. Now, that's what God tells us in James chapter 1-2 for us to do. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into temptations. That is, when you and I are being tried, we can grumble, we can mumble, do all kinds of things. But God said, count it all joy because God's trying to work in your life. God's trying to do something. He's trying to humble you where he can use you for his honor and his glory, you see. Now, we don't like to be tested, but it's for our good. I remember back in school, the teacher would say sometimes, tomorrow, I'm going to give all of you a test. And I didn't jump up and say, yay. Now, there might be some in the class that did. Like Mary back there, she was smart. She could show her brilliance, but I was ignorant, so I would have been glad to see a test come. Yeah, but God said it's for your good, it's for your good. A thorn in the flesh, yeah. Now, we find out here that sometimes that thorn in the flesh, we have to have it because we get, pardon the expression, too big for our britches. And God has to humble us. There are some people, God can begin to bless them financially. Oh, they get the big head. Look what I've done. They want everybody to admire them and adore them, to get the big head. And God has to maybe declare bankruptcy and bring them down a few notches. And all of a sudden they're humble again. There's some people that's got good health. And they say, oh man, I'm healthy. I've got good genes. You better be careful what you brag about. It all belongs to God. Your blessings belong to God. God knows how to cut us down a few notches when it's time. He does. He does. And Paul, here we found out that's what happened. And Paul said after he got realized, he said, most gladly, therefore, will I glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Oh, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Oh, he said that God might use me. I will glory in my infirmities. The trials that God sends me, I will glory that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Something we don't talk about, we don't preach about like we should in the church's day, is humility. Oh, to be humble. Not to be braggadocious. Not to be proud, but to be humble. To give God all the praise. Give God all the glory. Everything you've got and I've got is because of God's goodness. And we've got to make sure that he gets all the praise and the glory, you see, every bit of it. It's a dangerous thing when God begins to bless a person. You'll find out that they start not attending church as much as they should. They won't pray as much as they should. They won't read their Bible as much as they should. They won't witness as much as they should. And they won't live close to God as much as they should. Why? They're so busy enjoying the blessings. Oh, man, I like this. I haven't got time for this. Man, I want to do this. Yeah. I've seen people actually backsliding when God began to bless them. They'll get a camper and they'll get a boat and get all these things. And, man, the first thing you know, they've not got time for God anymore. They're just enjoying all the blessings. And then God has to humble them. And he knows how to do that, don't he? Paul said, it's good for me to be afflicted. Paul, are you sure? It's good for me to be afflicted. I've had a man some time back, I was visiting him in the hospital. He had a heart attack. And you know what he told me? He said, preacher, this is the best thing ever happened to me. I didn't have time for God, but God's got my attention now. I've seen people that would, a man used to come out of church. Boy, God began to bless him financially, and he would come to church every Sunday, him and his wife, and 2 kids. Every Sunday morning they were there, and God began to bless him. And the first thing you know, he began to miss church. And he had to declare bankruptcy before he'd come back to God. God, he said, it's good for me that I might be humbled. It's good for me that I might be afflicted. Yeah. Whatever it takes to lead a sinner back to Christ is a gain. It's good for him. The Bible said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 29 and 30, and if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it's profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee. For it's profitable for thee that one of thy members should be perished, and not that thy whole body shall be cast into hell. Now, when I first got saved, I read that in the scriptures, and I thought, boy, oh boy. If your right eye, pluck it out? Whoa. That's asking quite a bit, isn't it? Oh, if the right hand offend thee, pluck it off. Oh boy, I thought, my, that's hard to do. I don't know if I could do that, you know. I was pretty sure I couldn't. But I thought that's what it meant. That's not what it means. It says better for you to go to heaven with 2 hands, 1 hand, than go to hell with 2 hands. We have to put God first in our lives. That's how we have to make sure that's the way. The Bible said, for I reckon that the present suffering, this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us. Yeah. We have a common saying when we greet each other, and that is, how you feel? Oh, I feel great. That may be true and may not be true. Some people don't want you to know how they feel, so they just say that. I feel great when they don't feel great. They got something that's bothering them. They got some thorns in the flesh that's hurting them. Yeah, they got them. Now, you have to be careful when you say that to some people. How you feel? You better just say hi. Because if you say how you feel, unless you've got 2 hours, they'll sit there and tell you how they feel. Oh, man, they don't have anything to complain about. Well, they'll find something to complain about. Oh, man, yeah, bad, you know. Makes me think about the guy who went to a restaurant one day, and when he went into the restaurant, the poor waiter, he said, I'm cold. A little bit later, Nancy, he'd say, I'm hot. And the poor waiter run back and forth, you know, trying to make him happy. I'm happy, I'm cold. He'd go to the thermostat, and then he'd go, I'm hot. And the guy next door says, why don't you tell the guy to go jump in a lake? You can't make him happy. He said, well, it don't bother me. He said, I just go by the light switch and hit the light switch. We don't even have a air conditioner. There are people like that. You can't satisfy them if you had to, you know. They got something to complain about. Makes me think about old Farmer Brown. He decided his injuries from an accident were serious enough to take the trucking company to court that ran into him. And so this trucking company got them a high-class lawyer, and they said, the lawyer said to him on the stand, well, I'll tell you what happened. I had just loaded my favorite mule, Bessie, on the wagon. I didn't ask, the lawyer said, I didn't ask for any details, the lawyer interrupted. Just answer the questions. Did not you say that you felt good? Well, yeah, I felt good. And I was loading the buggy, a horse, mule on the buggy, and then the lawyer interrupted again and said, I didn't ask for all that information. And so he turned to the judge and said, Judge, make him answer my question. And the judge said, well, I'm kind of curious about what happened now. And he said, let him talk. He said, well, I got my mule, put him on the buggy, going down the road. This 18-wheeler ran into us, knocked us off the road. I went in one ditch, and old Bessie went in the other ditch. And he says, Bessie's over there moaning and groaning in her ditch, but I couldn't help her to save my life because I was in bad shape too. And he says, the patrolman come by and said, I'm sorry, your mule over there is in bad shape, and so I had to shoot her between the eyes. How do you feel? He said, I feel great. We often tell people we feel great when we don't. We're hurting. We got a thorn in the flesh, you see. The Bible says in Job 5:7, yet man is born in trouble as the sparks fly upward. Now, why couldn't God just make it so that we all have just a good time down here, not have any trouble whatsoever? David, the psalmist said, here's why. It's good for me when I'm afflicted. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, first of all, he means this here. It's good for me because it makes me strong. You ever been weightlifting? Weightlifting, they have an old saying when you pump them weights. No pain, no gain. And if you're going to be strong, you're going to have some pain, or you won't have no gain. That's the way it works. No weightlifter has ever been strong without pain. No pain, no gain. It's good for me that I be afflicted. Why? It makes me strong. A lot of times here in the South, we have these here tall pine trees. And with our pines, they can get as high as 50 feet high, I'm told. I did some research this week. That's a tall pine, 50 feet tall. But sometimes when the wind begins to blow, You can watch them pine trees and they're like this here. Back and forth. And it seemed like they would almost break. That wind blowing them back and forth. But you know what that's doing to that pine tree? It's affecting the roots. It's shaking the roots down there. And the roots are getting a deeper ground, and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. That pine just grabs and pushes it back and forth, back and forth. In order for that tree to grow, you have to have some wind to stir up the soil and make them roots to be soft again where they can grow. Because when the wind starts blowing, they start grabbing for more soil, more soil. And when you and I go through hard times, we start getting a better hold on the Lord. We get a better hold. We grab tighter and tighter. An old Chinese proverb says, a gem is not polished without rubbing, nor a man made perfect without trials. It's good for a man that I be afflicted. It makes me strong. No pain, no gain. Also, it's good for me to be afflicted. It makes me sympathetic. One of the problems we have in our society is our society has never learned. We keep voting people into Washington, D.C. that cannot sympathize with us, the average people. They in a world all by themselves. They live in a realm that we don't live in. But I tell you what, it's good for me to be afflicted because it makes me more sympathetic toward other people. Sympathy toward other people, it really does. You see, rich people, all they get on their mind is, how can I make money? How can I make money? They're not concerned about your needs and my needs. They're concerned about how can I make more money, more money, more money. There's a man who went to New York. He drove this Rolls Royce, and he went to New York City Bank, and he wanted to borrow $5,000. The loan officer, taken aback, requested collateral. Well, then, here are my keys to my Rolls Royce, the man said. The loan officer promptly laid the car driven into the bank underground parking garage for safekeeping and gave him $5,000. 2 weeks later, the man walked through the bank's door and asked to settle up for his loan of $5,000. He said that would be $5,000 in principal and $15.40 in interest. The loan officer said, man, he wrote a check and started to walk out. Wait, sir, the loan officer said, while you were gone, I found out that you were a multimillionaire. Why in the world would you need to borrow $5,000? The man said, well, where else could I park the Rolls Royce for 2 weeks in a staged place and pay only $15.40? The rich knows how to make money. They can't sympathize with us, you see. They can't sympathize with us. But we keep putting them in office, because we feel like they might help us out. You remember years ago, I preached at many funerals, and when I preached at funerals, I asked the Lord to help me to sympathize with people because I had my parents, I had my siblings, cousins. I didn't have any deaths in my family. And I asked the Lord to help me to sympathize because I had all my loved ones living. But one day I lost my mother. I lost some loved ones, brothers, cousins. And now when I preach at a funeral, I can sympathize because I have experienced that. You see, it's good for me that I have afflictions. It helps me to be strong. It also helps me to be sympathetic. You can't do it without it. Someone said it takes suffering to understand sufferings, heartaches to understand heartaches, loneliness to understand loneliness, poverty to understand poverty, and sickness to understand sickness. Unless you have done something yourself, been through that, you cannot really be sympathetic toward others, you see. Now, people could be sympathetic toward Jesus because they know how much he suffered. The Bible tells us in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, for we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but is in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. He knew. So he can sympathize with us. It's good for me to be afflicted. Helps me to be strong. Helps me to be sympathetic. Arthur Pearson was told as a young man that he was going to lose his eyesight. Sure enough, 3 or 4 years later, he lost his eyesight, and he saw nothing but darkness. During the Second World War, they had a lot of guys that got blind during the war. They didn't know what to do with them. Sometimes when people would lose their eyesight, they just go into hysterics and start hollering and screaming. And one day they summoned him to come to the bedside of this one guy they couldn't get to settle down. And he held his hand by his bedside, and he says to him, "I too am blind." And the man settled down. We have to go through things sometimes to be able to share, have sympathy with other people. And David said, it's good for me, it's good for me. Remember President George H. Bush was running for president? He lived in a world all of his own, upper class. And he's running for re-election. But he didn't know how we felt. And a guy come along by the name of Bill Clinton said, "I can feel your pain." Remember that? He was elected president because he was told people, "I can feel your pain." George H. Bush went to a grocery store and he saw a scanner reading the cashier thing, and he said, "What's that?" He didn't know what that was. But he said, "I know what you're going through. I can feel your pain. It's good for me to be afflicted because it makes me strong. It makes me sympathetic toward others and also for you." Back when they had a gas shortage and we were paying almost like $5 a gallon sometimes. And we would hope our politicians would do something to help us out. My goodness, go to a gas pump and get some gas and it costs you almost $100. That's a lot of money to fill your car up. But they couldn't understand. They didn't have to pay for gas. They had cars furnished to them. They had free gas and so on. But listen, you have to go through something in order to share sympathy with somebody. And that's why David said, it's good for me. It's good for me. Also, it's not only good for me that it makes me strong, makes me sympathetic, it also makes me spiritual. It makes me spiritual. I think most of us would agree that when things are going rough and the thorns in the flesh are pricking us hard, it's those times that we pray more than we ever do. It's those times we turn to God and say, "Oh God, help me. I need your help." For example, the psalmist said here, "It's good for me that I might be afflicted," but he said in verse 67 before that, he said, I went astray, but now I've kept thy word. It's good. It makes me spiritual, you see. Back in the years ago in April 1906, when there's a terrible earthquake there in San Francisco, 300,000 people were turned into the streets, homeless, hungry, and with no clothing except the clothing on their back. And they said, "Man, what are we going to do?" The earthquake broke up all the water lines. They had no water lines to put the fires out. And their fire was burning block after blocks, just burning and burning. What are we going to do? There's no water. There's no water to put the fire out. And they said the only way we can put the fire out is by using dynamite. Dynamite other buildings. Blow them up. As harsh as that may seem, that's the only way we're going to put the fire out. It's spreading, it's spreading. And that's what they did. Now, God sometimes uses some really harsh things for us to get our attention. because it's the only way he can get our attention, you see. Because we're all caught up in the good things. Oh man, I got this, I got this. I don't have time to pray. I don't have time to go to church. I don't have time to read my Bible. I've got time for television. I've got time for this, got time for this, but I don't have time for God. Watch out. God can get your attention. It might be a bed in the hospital. It might be financial ruins, but God can do that. That's why the psalmist said, it's good for me that I have been afflicted, because it makes me understand what I'm going through with. How about today? I don't know what you might be going through with, but I know this here. God says, my grace is sufficient for you. He can help you. He can help you. I feel led to preach this today because I feel like somebody in the congregation, maybe others, are going through some hard times. I know Brother Ron Smith is going through some hard times right now. But God has a purpose in everything that's being done in our life. And God has a purpose in your life too. Would you please stand, every head bowed, every eye closed?